Jeroo is a simplified version of Java. The programming language inside of it is. So when I run Jeroo, it gives you something like this, has the name, course, project. Depending on whether if you've run it before, it might give you some preferences as well. You want to do auto indent and Java if you haven't done that yet. I've already done that, so now name, course, Java, project. First project we're going to work on is called picking flowers. All right, so this is the interface for Jeroo. On the left side is where all of your code goes, and on the right side is the island that you're going to be working on. Initially, what we want to do is take a look at the help menu and the getting started tutorial. That's where all of our information is going to be to begin with. Here's our getting started tutorial. You want to walk through this. The basic idea is it goes through what the island looks like, what the grid cells are, what Jeroos do, how to do some code with it, and some ideas for a basic Jeroo problem that you can solve. And it's going to use this information here. Now, my assumption is you've already read this, or you are about to read this. I'm going to take this code and put it into my main program. So the main method is where your code always starts. It starts at the top of your main method and goes down. There are some important things to notice. Method is a keyword used in Jeroo, and that dictates that it's a method. Main is the name of our method that we're going to start with. In particular, the main method itself is where your code always starts. And actually, in the real Java full programming language, main is where your programs always start as well. Now, there's some important things to notice here. These two things are parentheses. Those are the things where you hold on Shift and hit 9 or 0 at the top of the keyboard. Parentheses are very different from this thing here and this thing here. Those are curly braces, just to the right of the letter P. Curly braces are very different from parentheses. They dictate different things. Parentheses are used for order of operations in mathematics, just like you would expect from any algebra class. And they are also used at the end of any method name. So main has these two at the end. Also notice Jeroo down here has two parentheses, pick has parentheses, hop has parentheses, all of these things here. Those are all the parentheses. Curly braces show where blocks of code are. So the main method begins at this curly brace and ends at its matching one down here at the bottom. This will become important later. Mismatched curly braces are the most common programming error that students make, other than not spelling things right. Other parts of this code. Whenever you see two slashes, that means that this is a comment. It ignores everything after the two slashes until the end of the line. So this here is actually notes for the program. You could write anything here and it wouldn't affect your code in any way. Typically, it's used for removing a line of code without having to delete it and then therefore retype it later, or to leave yourself notes for the program itself. At the beginning of this line, we have Jeroo and then a name is a new Jeroo. Now this part here, the Kim, that could be any name you want it to. Upper, lowercase, doesn't matter. As long as you're consistent with this name further down, you can name it whatever you like. This keyword here dictates that it's going to be a Jeroo you're making, and you're making a new Jeroo in this section of the line. Notice the semicolon at the end. Every line of Java and Jeroo ends in a semicolon unless it's an if statement or a loop. All right, so this line of code creates a new Jeroo. This line here makes this particular Jeroo, which they've named Kim, hop 4 spaces. Notice down here there's actually a hop with nothing in the parentheses. If you put nothing in there, by default, it just moves 1. Next, we pick up a flower, is what this command does. Next, we have this thing turn. Now, turn requires some information. It requires that you put in which direction you're going to turn. So in the help menu, if you look at the language summary, and we go to the action methods, down here it says turn relative direction. Relative direction, what's that? Well, we actually need to go look that up. So up here under the tabs, relative directions. So we're allowed to put in left, right, ahead, and here, all in uppercase. Those are the things you can put in a turn. All right, Kim hop is 1 space, as mentioned earlier. Toss throws a flower, if you have it, 1 space forward, and that will disable a net, if there was a net in front of you. Then we hop one more space and turn left. All right, so those are the things you can do with a Jeroo. Notice that it's always the name of the Jeroo, period, and which command you want to do after that. So whenever we're talking about these action commands, we're talking about a particular Jeroo. Under the language summary, there's a number of other things that you're allowed to do. So action methods. You're allowed to hop with nothing in the parentheses, hop where you put in a number, pick, toss, give. If you have multiple Jeroos, which you'll do in the third project, you can actually give flowers between them, and turn. Now, there's some other information you can look at when you're making decisions in Jeroo. For example, control structures. You can actually make a Jeroo do something only if something is true. So if a particular condition is true, it does a line of code. Alternately, you can say, if something is true, do one thing, and if it's not true, do something else. And the final variant of that is, if something is true, do a command. Otherwise, if something else is true, do another command, and continue on, and you can have a default block at the very end. Now, if you have the series of if, else if commands, it'll only do one of these things without checking the rest of the if statements. So if the first thing is true, it actually doesn't do any of the following ones. Notice that there are curly braces inside of here. So the if statement, whatever the question is that you're asking, goes inside of the parentheses, and then the block, the two curly braces, are what are executed if that command is true. And by block, this could be one statement or it could be multiple statements. It could even have if statements inside of if statements. That's allowed. Another command that you can do is a while statement. So you can have something called a loop, where it does a series of commands over and over again while this thing in the parentheses is true. So notice you do while, parenthesis, some question you're asking, and then the block. All right, so what are these questions you can ask, these conditions? Well, what they are is something called a Boolean method. It's something that's either true or it's false. And there's a series of things you can ask. So you can ask if a particular Jeroo has a flower. In here, this piece of code here, what I might want to do is only toss if Kim has a flower. And the way I would say that is if Kim dot has flower. So what this does is it asks Kim, do you have a flower? If that's true, it'll do this command here, kim.toss. Now, something that isn't required in Java programming, but is a really good idea stylistically, is to always tab over anytime you go inside of a curly brace. So notice that all of these commands here are tabbed over one space. This command here, inside of the if statement, is also tabbed over one space. This allows you to see easily, when you're looking at code, what is inside the if statement and what is not, without having to trace all of these curly braces and figure out what's inside what. This is actually a good habit to get into regardless of what programming language you do, and it turns out in Python, if you ever end up taking that, it's required in that. All right, so this is an if statement. I could put another thing in here if I wanted another command. And also, if Kim did not have a flower and I wanted him to do something else, I could put on an else statement with its own set of curly braces. All right, so what other conditions can I do? I can check to see which direction he's facing and use a compass direction in here. Now, compass directions are different from our relative ones. Compass directions are north, west, east, or south, all in uppercase. You can check to see if there's a flower in a particular direction. You can check to see if there's Jeroo, a net, water, or you can see if it's clear, which means there's no net, flower, Jeroo, or water in the indicated direction. Now, sometimes you want to have more than one thing. For example, you could check to see if there's a net before you toss the flower. For example, if there's no net, why would you toss a flower? And in order to combine two things into a particular statement, you use something called a conditional. What this means is you use an and statement, an or statement, and you can use something called not. You use these to combine the various conditions you're looking at logically. And the way this works is if you say not in front of a command, so not is water left, that's exactly as you would expect. Is there not water to your left? You can, besides not, you can also look at two statements together. So for example, and. So if this is true and this is true, the whole thing is true and it'll do what's in the if statement. If either one or both are false, it will do neither one. It will not do anything in the if statement. Or statement. If this is true, or both are true, then the if statement is executed. One more thing that's special is instantiation. So when you create a new Jeroo, there's actually a variety of ways you can create it. You can create it at the default location, 0, 0, facing east with no flowers. If you put one number in, that gives him some flowers to start with. You can do something comma something else as far as numbers go, and that will place him at a particular location, which will become important in the maze. You can have him facing a direction, you can give him flowers, and have him go in a particular square, and you can do all of those things. Hopefully that will get you started on Jeroo.